Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Ah, yes, my friends. Here we are on the Monday before America's 250th birthday. It's hard to believe. We've got people who want to celebrate our 250th birthday. We have people who hate everything about which this country stands for. They won't be celebrating. They're virtue signaling by telling us how much they don't like America. They don't like America's president and all of this sort of stuff, my friends. We've got, of course, news in Iran. We've got a Supreme Court ruling regarding temporary protective status. Lots of things, my friends, that I want to touch on and get to today. But I want to, as I've thought about America's 250th birthday, as I've thought about a lot of the things that we discuss on this program each and every day, I've stumbled upon a clip from a podcaster named Jennifer Welch. She is a leftist podcaster, and she has she said something on a recent podcast that I just saw over the weekend that I have to share with you. Because these things are important, my friends. I routinely define and explain this cold civil war that's taking place in America today. On a regular basis, I talk about how the left has taken over pillars of our society and that they've used that power to further their leftist agenda. They've taken over things like academia. I call these the 8 battlefronts of the cold civil war. Academia, the media, government. I don't want to go through all of them, but they've done this for a while, and it's been very effective. Entertainment is another one. It's been very, very effective at subtly pushing America to the political left. In fact, if you look at research, and I encourage you to go do this if you haven't done so yet. But if you look at research, what the experts have told us, my friends, of course, we have to trust the experts, I'm told. The experts have said that America's 2 political parties, what's happened to create this rift is that the Democrat Party has ventured further and further left. There's tons of examples of this. Perhaps the most obvious and the most recent is what we've seen in New York City with Zohran Mamdani. What's happened with recent socialists even being elected in New York City. The Democrat Party has become more and more leftist oriented, further and further to the radical left. The Republican Party hasn't really moved a whole lot. There's certainly a rift within the Republican Party. There always is and has been a rift between conservatives and the more moderate rhino types. But where the political shift has really taken place is in the Democrat Party and on the radical left. And this is where we have the most extreme, radical, ridiculous, absurd, unbelievable ideas and policies coming from. This is where the trans agenda comes from. This is where the socialist wing of the party is, as I've described. This is where the people exist who want to fundamentally remake this nation. These are the people who get very, very upset if you tell them that our rights come from our creator and not from government. And as we're moving towards America's 250th birthday, I've shared before, in a way, it would be nice, and I've thought about doing this, maybe we will, who knows. But America needs to symbolically, modern day Americans, those of us who love this nation, we need to symbolically recommit to the ideals set forth by our founding fathers 250 years ago in that Declaration of Independence, that beautiful document. And the truth is, if you read the Declaration, if you read the Declaration, and if you look at what there's one part of it in particular that always sticks out to me, because it's easy to gloss over these words. We're removed by 250 years of history now. Even for those of us who understand it and who appreciate it, the words have not maybe the same meaning. Well, they do intellectually, but there's a different emotional meaning to some of these words because we didn't live at that time. I find the same thing is true when I study and read the Bible. There might be a sentence in the Bible, and then the next sentence or shortly thereafter in the text, you'll find something that might be years into the future. I think about Moses, who was 40 years old when he was living, when he fled Egypt. He went to Midian. He basically lived out in the desert, the plains of Midian for 40 years. He assumed that his time being used by God or whatever, I imagine, was over. There was an emotional component to this. God appeared to Moses in the red bush, the burning bush, I should say, the red bush. The Red Sea is, of course, he crossed the Red Sea, the burning bush. But God appeared to Moses in the burning bush when Moses was 80 years old. Moses' life is segmented into three 40-year pieces. The first 40 years when he was living in the lap of maybe luxury and privilege in Egypt. The second 40 years he was out by himself, tending herds and so forth. He had fled for his own safety. He was fearful for killing an Egyptian. And then the last 40 years, he was basically leading the people out of the promised land and through the wilderness, out of Egypt into the promised land and wilderness and so forth. But you read sentences, and sometimes huge amounts of time happen between one sentence and the next, or one paragraph and the next. That you could do the same thing when you read about the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. For 13 years, he effectively was a slave or a prisoner. And then he suddenly, the overnight success that took 13 years, became the second hand man, the right-hand man of the leader of Egypt, of Pharaoh. And so it's easy to lose that emotional component. I try, as the more I've read the scripture, to understand. Of course, it's always good to look for God first in the scriptures, but I also try to understand and relate to the characters. What does that feel like? How much uncertainty, how much emotion is packed in these words? What's going on? What's the full context? You could think the same thing about David. David becoming king. He was anointed king, and then he basically was being relentlessly hunted by the current king, King Saul, nonstop, had spears thrown at him and everything else. David, he lived this way for years. We don't know exactly, but it could have been another 13 years, 14, 15 years, something like that. And it's easy when we read things to maybe step outside of that. But our founders, and this is what I want to talk about, the founders, when they signed the Declaration, and it said this: we mutually pledge to one another our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. When the founders did that, that wasn't just some verbiage that they decided to include in the Declaration. That was a real belief. They were committing to one another for the sake of this country to basically say, we're all in. We're all in. We'll sacrifice whatever it takes. We are committed to American independence. And they stood and they survived and they won. And by the way, some of them lost tremendous amounts of property. It wasn't just peaches and rainbows for these guys. Some of them had tremendous losses. They meant what they said. In order for us to win this nation back, in order for us to fight back against what the left has established here, we're going to have to do effectively the same sort of thing. Commit to that level. We mutually pledge to one another our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That's a tough thing for many people to sign up for, though, my friends. Many people want America to return to her roots. Many people believe in America, but man, it's comfy. Man, if I've got to have some opposition, if my job becomes something that is at stake, that's a bridge too far for some people to go. And I get it. I'm speaking to a select group of people within America First patriots. And it's not an easy thing for people to do. But in order for this nation to be solved, we're going to have to have that level of commitment. The left's made that commitment, not based upon virtue, based upon, I would say, well, derangement is part of it, but also part of it is believing that it's in their own personal self-interest to continue to force people to pay for things that they want, to continue to legislate immorality into our culture and into our society, to try to push God out two hands from our culture, from our founding, from our society. This is what we're up against. They've got control of these pillars of society, these battlefronts that we're fighting on. One of them is entertainment, and that's what we're talking about here with this podcaster, Jennifer Welch. And I'm going to play for you in a moment what she said, but I should have done this sooner, my friends. Let's be honest. When your financial world starts getting a little more complicated, you need more than one-size-fits-all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to options strategies and coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth, helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's all about having a dedicated team to guide you every step so you can focus on what matters most: your family, your goals, your future. Want real financial security and confidence in your life? Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. So that being said, let's get to this clip. Jennifer Welch, a leftist podcaster, and she's describing the Republican Party here. And I tell you, when I heard this, my mouth was agape. I could not believe that she's describing the average Republican, the Republican Party. She's projecting a lot here because this is what the godless radical left has become. But as we celebrate our 250th birthday later this week, the end of this week, and as we think about the ground we have to make up, the political fights we have to win, the fights that we have on different battlefronts in this fight, this battle, this American Cold Civil War that we're engaged in, just remember that we're dealing with people who have this perspective, who have this viewpoint of Republicans in this audience, the Republican Party. Let me just play this because it's candidly hard to wrap your head around this, but this is Jennifer Welch explaining who from her deranged perspective, the Republican Party has become in 2026.
The Republican Party has exposed itself for being the pathological, anti-family, pro-pedophilia death cult that they are. They lie. The wealth never trickles down. They have to cheat in order to win. That's what Richard Nixon's whole thing was about, cheating and then lying about cheating. And it used to be something that conservatives cared about. That mask is off. These are the most morally depraved people, both in politics and in the electorate out there, because there are millions of triple Trumpers that have never had to really be political because of their complexion and their bank account balance. And these are an immovable group of white supremacists that will socialize in cultured circles, and they will never admit these biases that they have, these bigotries that they have. But they edit them. They know when they can say them, and they know when they can't. And the Democrats need to acknowledge this is a group of people that is immovable. But here's the good news. A lot of these people send their kids to get educated, and then their kids become champions for social justice and for having a moral center in the country. And so we need to highlight every chance we get just how immoral, depraved, and what pathological liars the Republican Party has become.
There's a lot to unpack there, my friends. She said the Republican Party has exposed itself for being the pathological, anti-family, pro-pedophilia, death cult that they are. Just back, I don't even know what. First of all, anti-family. explain to me. Now, I will say this. Jennifer Welch and that delusional tirade there, she did come to the same conclusion that I have come to on this program, but she's got it completely backwards. She came to the same conclusion that Republicans have sent their children to public education, to college in particular. And these college professors are successful in reprogramming, or indoctrinating is probably the better way of saying it, indoctrinating kids that were raised in Christian or conservative families. But she says that we're pathological. Listen, I've started about, a month or so ago. We started posting clips of this program on Facebook and Instagram. I've shared with you, and sometimes on YouTube Shorts. But we've gotten a tremendous amount of traction on Facebook. And if you've not followed us on Facebook or Instagram, it'd mean the world to me if you did. If you don't, if you just listen on the radio or podcast, I understand. Right? Different people consume this content in different places. But I'm telling you, on Facebook, I hear, and on Instagram to a lesser degree, but we've grown pretty quickly on Facebook. I candidly had no success on Facebook for a long time. Listen, I don't mean this in some defeated way, but I had given up trying to figure out Facebook. We'd run into different types of problems. We'd run into, back in 2020, 2021, that was the era of people censoring you if you had a question about COVID, if you had a question about efficacy of masks, of the vaccines, of all this sort of stuff, 6 feet, 2 weeks to slow the spread, all that stuff. And then, of course, came January 6th of 2021. I had questions about that as well. I mean, they were taking videos down, and, I've had multiple people who are in the world of social media saying that, hey, you've been shadow banned, or whatever the terminology here, on some of these platforms. And I'd kind of stopped trying, not with our message and what we're doing, but you just have to focus on the area where you can get the greatest reach. And that's always for us been radio and podcasts. It's been people listening to to most or all of this episode. And so that's where we doubled down and spent our time. We've added stations since that period of time. But recently I kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to make one more college try here at social media. And so we started posting clips of this program, which I'm currently testing this on Facebook Live as well, putting the program live on Facebook. I don't know if we're going to continue that, candidly, because I found that the reels, the short clips of the program, is most effective at reaching people and so forth. But that being said, we're still doing that. And if you're someone that likes the Facebook feed, the live feed of the program, then let us know that, because we'll keep that into account. But anyway, we're just testing some things as far as that goes. But I got to tell you, it is routine for me to be called the most. I don't read 90+% of the comments now. I mean, we're reaching several million people with our reels each month now, thankfully, and hopefully that continues. Gets more people aware of the program, and you encounter all different types. But I am called every name you can imagine, and even names you probably can't even imagine on these clips. And listen, I don't know if they really think that their opinion of me and what I say matters to me. I'm not motivated to try to, of course, I want to reach, the mission here is to help people hear and receive truth, but my mission is not to win the approval of these people that can't define what a woman is. My mission here is not to get likes and thumbs up from people who are godless, radical leftists. My mission here is not to somehow be liked in the circle of socialists. That's just not what my intention is. My intention, again, is to help people hear and receive truth. And the truth is that this country is in one heck of a predicament because of these people. So when I listen to Jennifer Welch say that the Republican Party has exposed itself for being pathological, it is wild to me. Back when I was in college, you could have disagreements. You could have disagreements with classmates, and the other side didn't say you're lying. Sometimes someone just has a different opinion than you, but the amount of times that I'm called liar because I say I think something's the case, I believe something to be the case. They say, you liar. Oh, you lie. What am I? I'm not lying. Saying I'm lying when I'm sharing my opinion is you saying that I honestly don't have that opinion. I do have that opinion. It becomes a way for them not having to deal with reality. And so they say we're pathological. We're so devoid of truth that we can't even come to grips with what the truth is. And I would say pot, meet, kettle, because that's what these folks have become. They've lost all sense of morality. They have no moral compass. They don't want to call things objectively right or wrong. In fact, I've studied, I've debated with these people for 30 plus years. This is who they are. And now that's what they're accusing the Republican Party of becoming. I'm not here to defend the Republican Party, but I am here to say that that's objectively not living in reality. Anti-family, the Republican Party is anti-family. Tell me how the Republican Party is anti-family. It was the stated mission of leftist organizations to destroy the nuclear family. The feminism movement existed to destroy the nuclear family. Don't tell me that that's not that's something that the political right, the Republican Party, has tried to do. She's 180 degrees out of whack here with her assessment of reality. But this is what we're up against. And people that we're up against listen to this delusional nonsense as well. Friends, if you're dealing with discomfort or just tired of living off prescriptions and managing the side effects, you are not alone. A lot of folks are looking for something natural they can trust. That's why I want you to check out Christopher's Organic Botanicals, a family-run natural kratom company rooted in truth, tradition, and transparency. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. They lab test everything before it ever reaches your hands. No hype, no synthetics, no funny business, just the real deal done right. Real kratom is tested. It's responsibly sourced. The horror stories that you've heard about kratom come from shady sellers who are selling synthetic garbage that isn't even real kratom. Start with their kratom starter pack. Use coupon code ToddHuff. You will save 10% on your first order. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time out for me, and I'll tell you, if you're watching on Facebook Live, I end this stream and start another one here in just a moment. But I've got to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Second segment of today's program, talking about this clip that I played. I might play it again. It certainly entertains me. This is leftist podcast host Jennifer Welch. I know many of you are scratching your head saying, who is that? And I'm not here to try to give her free publicity. I'm here to try to expose the lunacy that you'll find coming from that particular side of the aisle. Again, I'm going to summarize part of what she said, or I'm going to quote part of what she says in her deranged statement. She said, the Republican Party has exposed itself for being the pathological, anti-family, pro-pedophilia death cult that they are. That's what she says. And I say, pot, meet, kettle. We're going to break this down. We've gone through pathological. We've been talking about anti-family here. And that's where we're going to pick up, my friends. Before I do that, though, are you tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that turn around and support this kind of garbage? The leftist causes, the left's propaganda, the left's mission, the left's values. Well, that's why we created Freedom Marketplace. It is a free, searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative values. Businesses that have vowed to not support leftist candidates, leftist causes. And by the way, they've signed an agreement that says if they do, they can be booted from the platform. Haven't run into that because these advertisers have brains and moral compasses, but if we do, that's how this would be dealt with. There's no login required, though you certainly can create an account if you want. There's no strings attached. It's just good patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business, my friends, for all. All right. So Jennifer Welch said the Republican Party has exposed itself for being pathological. I explained that everything I say on this program, if you go and look at our Facebook feed and look at especially the videos that get more traction, I say than most, you're going to see that people are going to say, liar, you just lie, lying, liar, liar, right? This is how they respond. There's no context. I say, what am I lying about? They don't know what to say about that because they didn't think that far ahead. They only read the part of the training that says, call your political enemies liar, brand them as a liar. That's what they do. That's how they think. I don't even want to say it's thinking. It's how they've been programmed. It's how they've been brainwashed. I don't know. It's indoctrinated is probably the best term here. There's so much pressure in some of these social circles to become leftist. There's so much pressure. The default, if you don't actively think about these things, and if you don't become a conservative accidentally. You have to be. Conservatism is the result of thinking things through and holding positions, or holding, I should say, principles and values. Leftism, my friends, is nothing like that. It is a completely anything goes, godless worldview. Hear me say this. I make no bones about this. This is what they believe. This is what they are up against. I had a dear friend of mine who tragically passed away a little over a year ago. Talked about him on this program. He had come on this program before to talk about some things with me. A dear friend who I respected greatly. And he used to say, he didn't come up with this line, but he's the one that I first heard this from when I started working with him years ago. But Brad used to say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And that is what we have on the left today. We have a group of people who are totally blind to the truth, blind to reality, blind to a moral compass. It's analogous to the people that Jesus tried to speak to, right? He wanted to give people spiritual sight. In a similar way, these are people, talking about the godless radical left, these are people who have set them up to be direct enemies of truth, of God, of the natural order. They live in darkness. They live in blindness. And so the one-eyed man comes along, and he can manipulate, mislead, deceive those who are completely blind without a moral compass, who have abandoned, become completely depraved in their sense of reality. That's what we have on the left. And by the way, I'm very careful about this. I don't call everyone who's who's left of center the godless radical left. I'm talking about a specific group. I'm not talking about liberals. I'm not talking about the Democrat Party. That is where they find their home, by the way, these radical leftists. But this podcaster, this Jennifer Welch, she's in that world of the radical leftists. Now she's describing the Republican Party as pathological, anti-family. Let's sit there for a moment. I said before the break that it's been the objective of movements on the radical left for some time to obliterate, to do away with the nuclear family, right? Father and mother living together, remaining married, having each having a role. They work together in complementary fashion, and there's the mother who provides nurturing and creates the home, and you have the father who's providing protection and provision. And it doesn't mean that both parents can't do different things, but in general, you have this nuclear family, the way that God set it up to work, right? I've always said, when the kids get a scrape on the knee, of course they're getting older now, but when they got a scrape on the knee or got injured, they wanted mom to comfort them. But when there was something in the middle of the night, a storm coming through, or a noise outside the window or the door, they come running for dad. They naturally understand these things. This is how God created the family to work. I'm curious how she thinks we're anti family. I suppose she says, well, if you're deporting parents, if you're detaining them on the border and you're putting them, you're detaining them, you're separating them from their children. Well, that's what happens when you break the law. No matter what law you break, if you break it and you get arrested, your kids don't go with you to jail. Jennifer, I don't know what you're talking about there. How the Republican Party is anti-family is beside me. The left has been at war with the traditional nuclear family for some time. They know, they don't want to admit these things, but the people at the top, the people with, metaphorically, the one eye, right? In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. The people with one eye in the movement of the radical left, they have enough vision. They can see that this is how it was designed to function. And they want to tear that down. They don't like God. I'm telling you, they don't like truth. They don't like traditional values. But you tell me how the Republican Party is anti-family because we don't allow children who say that they are a gender that's different from their biological sex, because we say they should not be allowed to mutilate their body, and that the people who do this are engaged in child abuse. The medical professionals, in air quotes, I should use that, the medical professionals who do these sorts of things are committing an act of evil, of violence against these innocent, confused young people. Of course, it's always perplexed me. If gender and biological sex don't match, then why is the first thing I need to do when I say my gender doesn't match my biological sex? Of course, I don't say that when others say that. Why is the first thing that many go to is now I have to change my biological sex? I thought gender did not correlate, was not related to whatsoever your biological sex. So why are we even messing with this in the first place? None of this makes sense. But then again, none of the other things the radical left pushes down our throats makes sense as well. Pro-pedophilia. You got to be kidding me. Who's out there taking kids? Have you seen some of these pride festivals, my friends? These things are disgusting. Listen, you don't even have to, my position on God's creation and all that sort of stuff, and that the LGBT movement is wicked and sinful. I don't, listen, I'm not taking any of that back, but you don't even have to come to that conclusion. You can say, listen, do your own thing, and I get it. I'm in that camp as far as, I think you can say something is immoral, but I'm not telling someone that they're not going to engage in it. I'm not trying to pass laws to prevent that. But which side is pushing just the over-sexualization of children? Have you seen? Who's wanting to do drag shows in front of kids? Who's wanting to talk with their 2- and 3-year-olds about their gender identity and talk about these overly sexual things when they're tiny? Who wants to introduce these things to kids in kindergarten? Who wants to teach little kids in school how to put condoms on bananas? Folks, this is real stuff. That pro-pedophilia. Listen, the only reason that the left is concerned about Jeffrey Epstein, the Epstein files, is because they think or hope that it somehow takes down Trump. We were talking about the Epstein files before Trump was even reelected. They had no interest in that stuff whatsoever prior to Trump getting into office and Trump's name being mentioned somewhere in an email and so forth, having known Jeffrey Epstein. That's where their interest in this comes. Pro-pedophilia. The left is engaged in the hyper over-sexualization of children, and they've got the audacity, or she has the audacity, to say that about Republicans. I've got to take a break, my friends. Out of time here. Quick time out. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about comments made by a leftist podcaster named Jennifer Welch. You've probably not heard of her. That's probably for the better, but I'm talking about her delusional comments about Republicans and who the Republican Party has become. I've gone through some of these things. She's, again, as I've asked, has she ever met a radical leftist? Has she looked in the mirror? Pot, meat, kettle. Again, she called the Republican Party pathological, anti-family, pro-pedophilia, and a death cult. She called us white supremacists. There's other things as well. Morally depraved as well. And I've been talking about this because it's remarkable. And then she celebrated at the end of her comments that some Republicans raise their children, they send them off to a public university led by some leftist lunatics, and she celebrates that the children of Republicans sometimes become enlightened, or I would say indoctrinated, by the godless radical leftists running these universities and so forth. But that's where we find ourselves. We have people on the left who are projecting much of what they believe onto people in the Republican Party. So I want to finish talking about this here in the time we have remaining. But friends, one of the biggest challenges conservatives have is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives. That includes how we invest our money. That's why I love what the team at 4-8 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that do not align with our faith and our values, so we're not funding things that go completely against what we believe in. They do the heavy lifting. They determine or give you information about which companies align with your values and to what degree and all of that. All you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment. You can do that by visiting 48financial.com/Todd, 48financial.com/Todd. Take that assessment. It's quick and easy. 4-8 Financial, because your money should work for your values. And friends, certainly it shouldn't be working against them. We've been talking about the left today. You don't want your money. I'm certain of this. You don't want your money benefiting these causes that are tearing America apart at the seams. That is designed these leftist organizations are designed to impact your children, to make them little leftists, to undermine the things that you've been teaching them, that you've been modeling for them to emulate as they get older. This is what's happening, and that's what Jennifer Welch is talking about here, though she's blaming Republicans. She says Republicans are a death cult. I've racked my brain on this. I've attacked what I assume she means by some of these other comments. What do you think she means by death cult? Because I'll tell you right now, the radical left is quite literally a death cult. I don't know if you've ever seen. If you haven't, I encourage you to watch some of these pro-life or abortion abolitionists who are on the streets talking with people about abortion. The amount of celebration over the murder of unborn children on the streets around this nation is mind-boggling to me. To be on the side of the abortion industry today is a wild, wild ride, especially when we know what we know about science. Obviously, there's no debate about this. They want there to be a debate about this when life begins, as though it's some profound mystery when life begins. Life begins, my friends, when the ovum and the sperm cell unite. You've got a living egg cell, a living sperm cell. They unite, and fertilization takes place. Those cells don't die, and then the organism, the fetus, the zygote, the clump of cells, whatever they want to call it, doesn't then revitalize and come back to life. No, that remains living. The living egg cell meets the living sperm cell. They have genetic code, and now that organism is 50% the genetics of the mother, 50% genetics from the father, and it begins cellular reproduction and growth. I mean, this is obvious for anybody who cares to see this. But what happens is you have people who are screaming, acting like lunatics, and defending some of these wicked, absolutely evil forms of child sacrifice, dare I say. And there are people who feel guilty for having committed these acts. You have people who maybe know people who have done these things and they're trying to excuse it. But if you want to talk about a death cult, Jennifer Welch, I think you should look in the mirror at the pro-abortion industry, because that's exactly what it is. And again, I have no problems doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on that, because that is a death cult. The people who are cheering for abortion are the ones who are involved in a death cult. And it's becoming more and more popular in certain segments of the Democrat Party. I would say overall, a lot of people have realized, because they've come to the conclusion, science has taught us a lot here if we care to pay attention. But it's pretty obvious that it's the termination of an unborn child. Do you realize, I did the math over this. This is going to sound mind-boggling. There's like 3.7 million births in the United States. 1 million of those, roughly 20% of those were elective abortions out of the 4-some million pregnancies. But I got to go, my friends. Thanks for listening, SDG.